Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Friday webinar. It is now 1 minute past 1:30 Central European Time, and as these sessions are very short, we try to start as precisely as possible. The webinar is recorded and automatically captioned, so you can use the closed captions button or CC button in Zoom to get the English captions. And we will provide a short presentation and then followed by a Q&A. Today is a little bit extra because we do also have some interaction in the middle. And if you would like to ask questions, then please use the Q&A function in Zoom. That makes it easier for us to understand what is a question and what is a comment. The chat is open also and monitored for any technical issues. And as usual, we will provide a link to the free smart guide that we have provided as part of this topic and this session for you to have a better chance to remembering what you have learned today. So this is just half an hour, very quick, free Friday webinar from the Funke Foundation. We are talking today about alternative texts, and my name is Susanna Loring, and I'm the Managing Director and Chair of the Funke Foundation. I sound like I should start a new career as a rock singer. I won't, and I think my cold is getting better, but I still sound a little bit interesting. I'm sorry about that. Apart from leading the foundation, I'm also currently chairing the joint technical body on e-accessibility for the standardization organizations in Europe at CSEN and CENELEC. And I also have the honor to represent both the UN initiative G3ICT and the International Association of Accessibility Professionals at EU level. Today, we're going to talk about alternative text, and that is interesting for all of you who have heard us talk about this for the last, 25 years, saying that this may not be the most important issue for all of, if you compare everything in accessibility, maybe alternative text is not what you should always prioritize, but surprise, things change. We have normally or historically been providing services to the public sector, and during many years, those websites were not the most problematic parts of those websites were not that they had too many images that didn't have alternative text. They had very few images and very just walls of text, which made a lot of problems for many users. So I think this and the kind of disconnect, because many clients came to us starting with reading the first requirement of WCAG, saying non-text content should be provided in alternative text and so on, and kind of the disconnect between the user needs that we saw and what people thought were maybe the most important part, that didn't really connect well for us. So I think that is why we always thought that this may not be the most important thing. But today, website looks completely different, and also in public sector, many organizations are now much better in providing illustrations and diagrams and photos and what do I know. And also with social media, where we have seen a lot of content provided in images or photos, visuals only, where the alternative text is really the kind of may distinguish between completely excluding people from the content and including. So that is why we decided to take up the topic of alternative text, because it's still, no matter what we do, in what part of the world we work in which sector, this is one of the issues we get most questions about all the time. So let's talk about alternative texts. I hope to go through a little bit about images themselves, of course, about alternative text, then slightly a little bit of interaction, if you are willing to do some exercises together with me live. And then I will also mention briefly diagrams and what happens when the image is also a link. And then we can hopefully have a couple of minutes left for the Q&A. So why does visuals matter at all when we talk about information or communication in the digital arena? Well, according to European statistics, between 20 to 25% of the European population is functionally illiterate. So this can have many reasons, of course. Quite a few people do not speak the maternal language of the country where they live in. We have many people with reading and writing disabilities, dyslexia, some people with cognitive issues. We may have people with the bad schooling, concentration problems. So there is a very holistic, broad and diverse reason for people not being able to read or not reading very well. So of course, if you provide another alternative format for people who have issues with reading your text, then you will reach more people with your content. At a global level, there are a lot of different reports and research material and statistics, and this is a very broad number, 50 to 80%. It's a lot, but the range is wide here, but really between 50 to 80% of internet users worldwide is said to prefer video to text. And of course, a video is not the same thing as a photo or illustration. And the reason I quote such big numbers here are that it really depends on where you ask and how you ask. And quite a few of those investigations has to do with marketing materials. So how do you prefer to get your promotion, so to speak, or marketing? And also some of them are focusing completely only on social media. But it doesn't matter. At least 50% of the users prefer something else than text. And that can also be seen when you look at how people use YouTube instead of Google or other search engines, and just the sheer volume of videos and the visual material that is out there right now. So it's quite clear that if you would like as many as possible to understand your message, you should not only provide text, but also something else. So we can agree on using of images being a good thing, but not only from an accessibility point of view, but also because I think it's common knowledge in communication in a broad sense that it is an important way to support your message, even if you do have text as kind of the first alternative, or there usually many of us at least start. It's also very useful to help understanding if you have an instruction or kind of a stepwise description or something, or just, you know, if you have a recipe at the back of some, just a cooking ingredients or something at the back of a package, and you have, maybe it's very small letters or in a language you don't understand, then if there are a couple of illustrations, it becomes much easier to understand if the water should be boiling first, or if you put the thing in first and then boil, and the number of minutes and so on. So it's really, really useful in extremely many situations in life to combine text and illustrations or visuals, photos, whatever. Also, any kind of visuals actually makes a dense text easier to read for many people, or maybe all of us, that reads visually, but especially people with reading and writing difficulties. So even if the image doesn't really help you understand, it can still help kind of format and make the layout easier. So we have seen that in a lot of user tests, that people with dyslexia and other reading and writing difficulties may kind of shy away from a text that is very, very dense and look like a wall of text. But of course, formatting helps. And then if you kind of lighten it up a little bit with images or visual design things, then it becomes even more appealing. And really, many users appreciate that. So even if the image is not kind of perfectly aligned with the message, it can still help the reader. So let's try. I put in an image here, a photo that I like, which is kind of a photo of a wooden, I think it's a table, I would guess, and then there are just letters in different colors. So this isn't a perfect way of illustrating the message here of using images, but it kind of associates to a little bit what I would like to say, that, you know, it's a combination of not text but letters and a photo of letters as well. So I think this looks nice, and it's also appealing. It looks a little bit like candy, and it's colorful and so on. But maybe some of you finds it disturbing. You're trying to see, what does it say? Is there a word there? Is there a meaning in this? And how does this help me understand anything? And then the image is confusing instead, or makes you irritated or frustrated. So it's important to make sure that we think about the kind of photo or illustration visual we would like to provide. And then the best thing is, of course, to test with users. Sometimes it's better not to have the photo there at all. And if my message here is use images, exclamation mark, then we may use any image. So I'll put in another one, which is a very cute image of a baby elephant. But then I'm sure most of you would start thinking, what on earth is she now showing? And how does this have to do with anything in communication and accessibility? Then I'm kind of losing you, because now you're thinking about the image and having your own ideas or dreams or thoughts about your next tour to Africa or whatever. And then this image doesn't help at all. So in short, context is everything. A very cute baby elephant can be the perfect photo somewhere, but not always. You need to really think about what photo or illustration, diagram, what any visual you want to show, how that connects to the message, and of course your target audience, and then make sure to think before you publish it. And this is something that I think the whole idea or concept of alternative text is really the most important thing, or maybe the most kind of the bonus of this is that when we train our clients in how to use alternative text, it makes them start thinking about the photos that they actually use or visuals they use. And that can be a very good exercise in itself. So the first thing we learn is about context. So the second thing, of course, is that we do have users with visual impairments or are completely medically blind. And for these user groups, you need to always consider using an alternative text. Not having an alternative text is not an option. So either the visual you provide, the image, is meaningful in some way. You have an idea behind it, an association, a message, it means something to you, then you need a descriptive alternative text of the purpose of this image, if it is meaningful, if and when it is meaningful. And you, as the content creator, decides if it's meaningful or not. If the image is purely decorative, so it has no meaning, it is only decoration, then the alternative text should still be there, but be empty. So again, you cannot just jump over and not do anything and take the alt text away. That is not an alternative, because then the assistive technology will start reading something else that you cannot control, or the user may believe that something is hidden that he or she doesn't get read out loud to them. So you always need to consider the alternative text. So what is decorative? Well, this is our how we do design in the foundation. This is part of our kind of basic design. We have it on our website, in our presentations, in our reports. They are rectangles with like softened angles, and they come in different sizes, and we can use them for different things. This is purely decoration. And of course, you could describe them, but it wouldn't really make sense. And something that is purely decorative is also like a line that puts one part of the text to one side, and then the other part of the text is kind of, they are detached, they do not go together. That those kind of separational lines and things like that, that's also purely decorative. But then there are, of course, visuals that could be decorative or could be meaningful, and that's really up to the user to decide. Hardcore accessibility standards wise, it should be really meaningful, and it should be kind of with no feelings behind it. But when we do tests with users, we find that many users of screen readers really appreciate to get quite a few of images that don't have a specific meaning to them explained as well. But this may differ between different cultures and in different contexts, so it's important to understand. But just a couple of examples from websites we have looked into not too long ago. So this is just I think it's a rainforest with low-hanging clouds, so this has to do with nature. And then another typical kind of atmosphere image, or what you would like to call it. So when you come work with us, this is for recruitment. Look how we have a really nice working area where you can sit in a sofa and people are laughing together. So this is just how nice it is here. A very typical one, except for public sector, is of course kind of two people holding hands, talking about relations or healthcare or things like that. This is with two elderly people holding hands again and walking outdoors. I think they are picking something, mushrooms maybe, or berries. So really could be relationships, could be just, you know, something nice and beautiful. And a skyline of a city could also be, this is from New York, but it could be the municipality of whatever, describing come to stay in this area, or we are competing with other municipalities and so on. So all of this could be absolutely decorative in the way they are presented on our websites, but they do provide some kind of feeling or atmosphere or idea about the website. And the way we see it is that you can never do exactly right here if you don't know every one of your users. But in the balance between maybe providing too many alternative texts and risk having a couple of screen reader users saying, that's too much information, I don't know this. But it's better to do that, and instead of having a couple of screen reader users saying, hey, I feel discriminated against, why shouldn't I be able to get the same atmosphere or idea about what the feeling of this website is about? So we would always recommend to describe these images as well. But again, it may differ in different contexts and cultures and so on. And you may also find users who say, please don't do that because it's far too much. So it depends, and always depends on the users, of course. But let's go on with the alternative texts. It's important to describe the purpose of the image. So why did you put the image there, and what is it supposed to reveal? And the purpose must be described in context, because of course any image can be described in different ways depending on what the purpose is and what your precise message or meaning is in this context. Try, if possible, to start with a keyword or keywords so that the screen reader user that gets this read out aloud to them don't get a whole bunch of ifs and buts and text before the keyword comes. It's easier to get the most important things first. And then it's important to describe what type or kind of image this is. So it can be useful if it's a photo, if it's a diagram, if it's an illustration, if it's a comic, so that you know kind of the style of the visual that you are providing. Also, another thing that is highly debatable, but I think we can agree on, that it shouldn't be a novel. An alternative text needs to be short enough so that it can be digestible. So the recommendation is 1 or 2 sentences only. Do not try to explain exactly every detail in the image. That will be overdoing it. And of course, in your organization, it's important that you are consistent. So if you have a website with multiple content creators, make sure that they have some kind of manual or idea on how you write the alternative text. Is it very formal, or is it very informal? Is it do you write first what it is, and then if it's a photo or illustration or comic book, and so on? So what order you do things, and kind of the way, the level of language that you are using, that is very good if you can keep that consistent throughout the website. So let's try. And now I think we have both the chat and the questions and answers. So you can write wherever, or you can just write at home, whatever you like. So this is an image, and now I'm not going to do any audio description of this, because then you will see how I'm thinking. So what do you think would be a suitable alternative text for this? And now you have to imagine in what context you are writing. So something, if you would provide this in any invented context that you have, what is the alternative text you would write to this? So 2 children standing on a sandy cliff looking out into the deep blue water. Holiday, a photo of 2 little child at the beach looking at the sea. Two children holding hands standing in front of the ocean photo. Traveling with kids, photograph, a small boy and a girl overlooking the sea. Two children holding hands looking over the cliffs photo, yes. And then in the beginning, I see this as mainly as decorative, and let's say that it gives value to the message on the page. Okay, so I think this is vacation. Two small children holding hands looking at the ocean, one of them pointing out to the horizon. Here we get a little bit more information. So I think this is very interesting and very good, all of them. And you kind of, this is similar, all of them. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. But what if the context here was children's safety? They are on a cliff, and you could imagine that it's possible to fall down. It could also be kind of spring fashion for kids, or maybe summer fashion. Or it could be a photo that is supposed to kind of show friendship or something like, or youth maybe. So, and I'm not asking you to rewrite your examples here, but just to have an idea that this could be used in many different contexts, and that would then make your ideas and suggestions maybe differ a little bit from what you started out with. We start with just what we see, and then we kind of add the context to this. So very good. And I can see also that there was a mix of a photo showing this, and first the content, and then full stop photo. And the second part is what we usually recommend, to first describe what's on the visual and then describe the type. But there are other experts that have different recommendations. So again, the most important thing is that you have a consistency in the way you provide this. So I see that I'm talking longer than I thought, so I will not do this. I will come to another part, which is like diagrams. This is to me, very nice looking, but very interesting diagram. I can't remember what these diagrams are called anymore, but I picked it because I think it's nice to look at. But I did think for quite a long time before I understood what it actually shows. So, and I think it shows how different kinds of fruits are consumed. They're first grown in different farms, then they are consumed in different sectors, and then some of the leftovers becomes landfill, and some goes to compost. And of course, a diagram like this, or even worse, maybe a staple diagram or a chart where you have loads of numbers, is extremely hard for many people to understand. And if you try to explain this in an alternative text, it will be very difficult. And because many people have problems understanding these kind of complex charts and infographics and all of these things, I mean, they really help. So it's good to have them, but it's also very hard to understand them in detail from the beginning. The strong recommendation here is to explain the idea of this. What is it that you try to show with the diagram, and to explain that in the surrounding text. So the alternative text doesn't try to explain exactly everything. I mean, in this case, it would be impossible, but quite often in statistics and things like that, we see that the alternative text becomes very dense and long, and I don't really think they are helpful, because if you don't want to kind of provide your own bias on how you read things, or what the most important number is, then you will for sure write a whole novel in the alternative text, which is not the intention. So when the image is complex, when it contains a lot of information, numbers, and so on, try to explain it in the text body instead. And then the alternative text can be either, you can put it as decorative, or you could say this is a multicolored diagram explaining how fruits, well, I can't invent a good old text for this, but just explaining kind of the overall what this is trying to show, but really to have kind of the message beside the text instead. So, and the last part that I wanted to cover today is when the image is also a link. Then this happens quite often these days. And if the image is not only an image, but also a link, you need to describe the destination of the link, so that the text message, or the link in text, so to speak, is provided also for assistive technology. And when looking for a good example for this, we talked internally and said, well, usually there is a text in the image, so that you have the text kind of on the image, and then that is also a link. And then it was funny because I actually found on LinkedIn that I was invited to some sort of webinar on the 3rd of November, and there was no text to this, but it's a very kind of cool picture with a very modernistic, I think, woman with with fancy high-tech glasses and so on. And I had to click on this to understand what it was, what I was invited for, and it was a webinar about the metaverse. I thought we kind of left that, but it seems to still be going on. So if your image is also a link, this is very popular, then make sure that you have the description of the destination of where this link is leading. Just as any link needs to be understandable, taken out of context, the image, of course, also needs to provide an alternative text that describes the destination of the link. Otherwise, it's very hard to know where you are going if you click. So just as a reminder, start with the keyboard, describe the purpose of the image, and do not write a novel. Keep it short. And let's see if we have a couple of questions. So do you use ChatGPT or other AI tools to generate alt text? I think ChatGPT is very good in alt text, especially with diagrams. Are there some example for good prompts or a collection of good prompts? Do you recommend AI tools? Well, I don't think we can recommend either one or the other. We have done a lot of research where we have used automatic generated alternative text, especially in content management systems. At that time, this was long ago, they were not good, but we saw that it was a very good way to make the content creators actually write alternative text. So we kind of provided, not we, but the system provided a not so good alternative text. And then we had a much higher percentage of the content creators fixing that than if it was just blank and we said, please do add an alternative text. Maybe it was difficult to start, or they didn't know where to start. So it can definitely be a kind of a nudging tool for people. In English, the alternative texts that are provided both within the tools, and also you can, of course, take it from elsewhere, are getting better and better. But it's a big difference between different languages, and in small language areas, I don't think we can recommend using AI tools for this, or at least you really have to make sure that you check it afterwards manually to quality assure this. I do not have a recommendation collection or a collection of good prompts. Maybe there are, but not to my knowledge. So let's see if we can have another question. How do you know that screen reader users prefer short alternative text? Well, we cannot know. I think it's a common perception or understanding, and we see in user testing that at least if they are too long, users tend to dislike that. But of course, it needs to be long enough to explain the purpose of the link, or of the image. Otherwise, so it's not like short, just one word. But it's true. Again, that's really a matter of preference, and we cannot know. None of us can know exactly how long an alternative text should be to make everyone happy. And the last question. So when it's a decorative image, it's better to add alt text but keep it empty than writing in the alt text decorative image. Yes, that is true. The recommendation is to do the small the null message, or keeping the alternative empty. You do not have to write decorative image, but because if you write that, the assistive technology will read this is a decorative image, and it's better that you let the technology do its job, so to speak. So I think that is what we could do today. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of your Friday, and see you again on the 8th of November, where we have our next Friday webinar. That is, the content is a secret, but we will now provide the links to the smart guide into the chat, and the recording will be up shortly, so you can watch this video again. Thank you very much for being with us today. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.